All right, I guess you can go back to your seats. Hey guys, let's give it up for the band. They did a good job tonight. Really solid, good job. And I really appreciate that last song they shared because I don't know about you, but I'm really glad that my relationship with Christ is not dependent upon my faithfulness, but it's dependent upon His. Did you get that in the last song? It's not our faithfulness that matters, it's His faithfulness, and we rest in His faithfulness. I'm glad you guys are here this summer and here tonight. How's your summer going? Everybody having a good summer? Yeah. You bored yet? Ready to go back to school? No. How many people are ready to go back to school? There's always a handful. How many people wish summer would just go on for the rest of your life? Well, not very many want to do that either. How many just don't even care, have no idea what I'm talking about? Okay, there's a few of those too. All right, so I want to talk to you tonight about a story out of the Old Testament. I've been doing this Bible reading plan for almost a year now, trying to read the Bible in a year, and it's called the Balanced Bible Reading Plan, and we've been in the book of Numbers. And the book of Numbers doesn't sound like a very great book. I mean, the name's pretty lame, but it's actually got a lot of great history in it of the people of Israel and kind of what they did after they left Egypt. That would be the book of Exodus. Exodus being, how to exit. That was all about how they exited from Egypt. Numbers is all about what happened next. So it doesn't sound like a very exciting book, and there are a lot of numbers in the book. That's why it's called Numbers. But there's also some great stories, and there's a great story in there that I'm guessing most of you are familiar with. And in the story, it has these 10 guys that are leaders. They're known leaders of the day. And the Bible actually lists out their names. And so here's what I want to do. I want to read their names to you and see if you can figure out the story that I'm talking about. You game? Think you can do it? All right, here we go. These are great Bible names. So be great. I don't care what your name is tonight. You're going to be grateful after you hear these 10. All right, you ready? Shammua. That's guy number 1, leader number 1. Leader number 2, Shaphat. Leader number 3, you guys got the story yet? Anybody got the story? Okay, leader number 3, Igal. I-G-A-L. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Igal. Leader number 4, Palti. What's up, Palti? No. Leader number 5, Gadiel. Leader number 6 sounds like a nickname for leader number 5 because it was Gadiel was 5. 6 is Gaddy. Not awful. It's kind of in the realm of possible. Gaddy. All right. Then you have leader number 7 is Emil. Leader number 8 is Sether. That's doable. Leader number 9 is Nabi. I'm with you on that. All right. And then leader number 10 is Geuel. These are famous leaders from the book of Numbers. How many people know the story I'm talking about? What story is it? Oh, you don't know. You just raise your hand for fun, had to exercise, stretching. All right. This is a famous story. Now, the reason you don't know these guys' names, their names are in the Bible, clearly listed with 2 other guys' names. If I told you the other 2 guys' names, you'd probably know the story. But the reason they're not listed is because these are the 10 guys who didn't trust God. And they died. They were killed. The other 2 guys were, Caleb was one, and Joshua, all right? It's kind of weird. The Bible's got lots of things like this where it's got like 10 really weird names, right? And then Joshua and Caleb. David was the youngest he had 7 brothers, and all of them have weird names. Abinadab, all this kind of stuff, and then David. It's like the parents finally woke up and came up with a decent name at the end after 7 tries, right? So, you guys remember the story? Let me set the stage for you. In the book of Exodus is all about Israelites, the Jewish people, leaving Egypt and going to the promised land. Now, you remember how they got in Egypt. Joseph, sold by his brothers into slavery, ends up down there, ends up leading this effort. They had this huge famine. And Joseph, one of the 12 brothers, leads this great effort to save people from the famine. And his brothers, who think he's dead, or at least a slave at this point, their father sends them to Egypt to find food. And it leads to this whole thing. We're not going to go into all the detail, but Jacob and his 12 sons eventually leave the promised land, and they come to Egypt to live because that's where the food is. And Joseph is so blessed that Pharaoh lets them live in the most plush area. They marry, they have kids, they raise their cattle, and they end up being millions of people living in Egypt. They're not where they're supposed to be. Then a new Pharaoh comes along, and he becomes threatened. He thinks, man, these people are multiplying, they're getting bigger, there's more of them than there are of us. If we're not careful, they're going to revolt or rebel against us, and we're going to be in big trouble. So he puts them into slavery, makes them, live in these like squatter camps, horrible areas, in just poverty. They get up every morning, they go to the fields, they make bricks. There's a lot of historical evidence that tells us that the pyramids, you guys familiar with the pyramids in Egypt? And the ones in England are really great. And the Sphinx, you've heard of this? There's a lot of evidence that says those things might have been built on the backs of Jewish slaves. They were slaves. They lived awful lives. And then God brought along a guy named Moses. And he said, Moses, I want you to go down there and, lead my people out of Egypt. And then this whole story, this crazy story about Moses and Aaron. They go down there, try to convince Pharaoh to let them leave. Pharaoh's like, no way. They have 10 curses, these frogs everywhere, boils on everybody. Then it culminates with the death of the firstborn of every family, be it human, be it animal. The firstborn are all killed. The only ones who live are those who what? The Passover, right? The ones who put the blood on the doorpost. Everybody else, their firstborn, including Pharaoh's firstborn, died. He finally relents, lets them go. You remember the first thing that happens, the Red Sea, right? The parting of the Red Sea. The Egyptians all drown in the sea. The Israelites make it through. And now they're on their way to the promised land. And every step of the way has been a picture of God's grace. Imagine being in those days, those curses that let them go. Imagine walking through the Red Sea on dry land with these walls of water around you, running from the Egyptians. Imagine that. How incredible. How could you not believe in God if that happened in your life? Then they get over into the wilderness. They're making their way to the promised land, and God provides this pillar of fire at night to guide them, and a cloud during the day to guide them. He provides food that mysteriously falls from heaven every morning, and they go out and gather it up and eat it. It's incredible. God is all over this thing, and they make their way through the promised land, and they get to the Jordan River, and they're looking over into the area where they're supposed to go back, which is the place where Jacob and his family came from. You guys know this, right? So they're kind of going back to where they came from. And they get to the river, and Moses has this idea. I don't know if it was God's idea or if it was just Moses' idea. But his idea was, let's pick one leader from each of the 12 tribes. We'll send them over to scout out the land and tell us what to expect when we go over there and take control of it. So Moses said, I want you guys to go over there. I want you to look to see if there's forest. I want you to check out the fruit. Check out, is it good for land for grazing animals? What are the cities like? Are they big? Are they walled? What are the people like? What's the culture like? And then come back and bring a report, right? So these 12 guys make their way over. They scout the land out. And he actually says to them, I want you to bring back some fruit. It's kind of interesting. It's actually in the Bible. Bring back some fruit so we can check it out. And the Bible says that these guys found a cluster of grapes that was so huge that it took 2 of them to carry it on a pole between them. You guys have been to the grocery store, right? You ever bought grapes at the grocery store? Ever have a problem lifting them up and placing them into the bag? It's not really that big of a deal, right? Imagine if it was like this, 2 guys carrying it. So they bring back this fruit, in this amazing stories of the land. And Joshua and Caleb say, it's just like God said it was going to be. It's perfect. They got trees, they got fields for our cattle. It's beautiful. There's water. The fruit is amazing. The ground is so fertile. Stuff grows like crazy. It's just exactly what God told us it was going to be. Let's go, man. Let's go. Let's go get it. And the other 10 guys go, oh, no. Oh, don't think so. And the Bible says they brought a bad report. They brought a bad report. Now, if you and I were sitting drinking a cup of coffee and I were to ask you, name some of the sins that Christ followers commit, some of the things that we do wrong. There'd probably a lot of commonality in the list that we would come up with of the things that we do wrong, about being dishonest or stealing or, disobeying parents or whatever. So we probably have a fairly common list. But the issue I want to talk to you about tonight, I would be willing to bet that very few, if any of you, would have this issue on your list. And this is the very issue that kept the Jewish people out of the promised land. And the issue was this: comparison. That was the sin they committed. Comparison. They went over there and they compared themselves to the people there, and they didn't feel like they compared very well. And so they decided to not trust God. Let's not believe God, the guy who brought us through the Red Sea. You remember that? The guy who dropped manna from heaven for us to eat every day we've been out here. The guy who guided us by a pillar of fire at night and a cloud during the day. No, let's don't believe him. Let's believe our senses, what we saw, and let's come up with another plan, because surely God doesn't want us to go over there and get our rear ends kicked by these people, basically. 10 guys. And once they started whining and complaining and talking about how bad it was, guess what happened? Everybody else started, oh no, we can't go, because you know how misery loves company. You ever been in a room and somebody starts talking negative about something and it starts snowball. Oh yeah, and it just becomes this big complaining fest. And that's kind of what happened. And the people decided that day that they were not going to obey God because they committed the sin, the wrong. They made a bad choice. They made a mistake, whatever you want to call it. The Bible calls it sin of comparison. Anybody in here struggle with comparison? Don't raise your hand. Anybody in here think about comparing yourself to somebody else today? Anybody here look in the mirror today and think about, man, I wish this or I wish that? Anybody look on social media today and think, man, I wish my life was like theirs? Hey, this is a sin that's been around for forever. People have been doing it since Adam and Eve. We always think something can be better instead of trusting the truth that God has already given us. All of these people knew. God had already told them, I am going to give you this land. It's a great land. It's unbelievable. And then he guided them all the way there, and they get right to the cusp of experiencing all that God wants for them, and they fall into the trap of comparison. It's been going on a long time. There's movies about it. Look at the slide. I bet you've seen this movie. Yeah, Toy Story. You guys seen this movie? Right? The whole movie is based on comparison, right? Woody's got it, he's got it made. He's Andy's favorite toy, right? Perfect position on the bed. Life is great. And then along comes Buzz Lightyear, right? Buzz makes noises. Buzz has lights. He's got all kinds of, he's got a helmet. Yeah, that's it. Helmet. This thing goes up, he's got, and all of a sudden what happens? Woody starts comparing himself to Buzz, and he thinks, Andy's not going to love me anymore because, and I know I'm kind of being silly, but the point is that entire movie, everything that happens in that movie is based upon Woody's dislike of Buzz because of the comparison. He's comparing himself to One toy is comparing himself to another toy. Now, we take it to a whole new level, right? We compare ourselves to other people. So, comparison, it seems like not that big a deal, but it's a huge, huge deal. And I know so many people. I work with young adults now, 40 and under, married people for the most part. Got some singles in their 30s and 40s. And I've been on staff for 12 years. Before I came on staff at Woodstock, I taught middle school Sunday school at Woodstock for 9 years. I was in youth ministry for 21 years. So when I first became the young adult pastor, the most common question I get asked is, what's the difference between working with students and working with the young adults? And the answer was, they're older. That's it. It's the same stuff. They're as bad about this comparison thing as anybody. This is not a sin that is age appropriate or more prevalent in a certain age than it is in others. There's senior citizens out there comparing dentures with each other. Or diapers, maybe. But anyway. So comparison is not, I didn't pick this topic because I was speaking to middle school and high school. I picked this topic because this is what I was reading in the Bible, and it reminded me. I actually talked about this Sunday to newlywed couples who are as hung up on comparison as anybody in the book. So what kind of comparisons did they make in the Bible? In this story, they worried about the cities. The cities they were going to have to conquer were large. They had big walls around them. They were really worried about those walls. Y'all ever heard of this city called Jericho? Did God have any trouble with the wall? No. And yet they were focused on, these cities have big walls around them. What are we going to do? And it's like they completely forgot how big their God was. Remember, Red Sea, manna, pillar of fire, cloud, all this stuff. Water from the rock, all this stuff. And they completely forgot about it because the walls were. It also said they were big. It says the people were big and strong. Apparently, there were some giants that lived in that area. Now, if you're my height, there's a lot of giants in this room right now. If I were to fall into that comparison thing, all right? Jewish people kind of historically are known for being on the shorter side of things. No, I'm not Jewish. But I don't know if they were exaggerating or if the guys were actually as tall as they say, but they called them Nephilim. And later on, they get to the story of Goliath, and he is of that lineage. The most famous giant besides Andre. Goliath was in that same lineage, all right? So these people are huge and they're strong. I'm so scared of them. What kind of comparisons do you make? I want you to think about it. Don't say anything out loud. Think in your mind, today, what have I compared to other people? And has it been an encouragement or has it been a discouragement in my walk with God? Any ladies compare hair today? Having a bad hair day? Wish my hair was more like... So you weren't even tracking with me at all. So you tell me, what do you guys compare? Somebody raise your hand and tell me. Give me something. What?
My sister compares, both of them compare
Makeup. All right, makeup. I can totally not relate to that. All right, yes, ma'am. Weight. Oh, that's a beautiful one, right? Weight. I think I'm just going to leave that right there. Yeah, right here. Just body, right? Body appearance. The appearance of my body. I mean, not everybody can look like this, right? Some people have to work at it. Sports teams, athleticism, right? Some people more athletic than others. What do you got? Is that video game skills? Is that what I heard? Something about Fortnite. I'm better at Fortnite than you. Well, I'm better at Pong than you, all right? Yeah. Siblings, right? Hey. Look right here. Right here. Bring it back. Bring it back. Anybody have that problem of comparing yourself to a brother or a sister? Okay. The only children are going, nope, not me. I'm the king of the roost. Right? So imagine being in Jesus' family. You know, he had brothers and sisters, right? Can you imagine Mary or Joseph saying, why can't you be more like your brother Jesus? Be pretty tough. But do your parents ever compare one child to another? You ever feel like that? Seriously, okay? That's a problem, right? So we compare lots of things. Facebook, Instagram, whatever you guys are on, social media. That's like the MySpace. That's good. Social media is like the epicenter of comparison, is it not? I mean, everybody's trying to make it look like everything's great, my life's perfect. What about clothes? What about cars, guys, as you get older? Maybe now. All right? All kinds of things. So we are guilty. Well, what does it sound like when we compare? See if any of these words ring a bell. When we fall into the trap of comparison, this is what they did back then, and I bet we do it today. Gossip, rumors, putting other people down. Somehow we feel like that's going to make us feel better. We bully people. We exaggerate. We don't tell the truth. We exaggerate, or we only tell a portion of the truth. I don't know what you call that, de-exaggerate, where you tell less than everything in order to make yourself look better. They called it a bad report. They said the land devours those living in it. The land devours those living in it. What does that even mean? Sounds awful though, doesn't it? They say all the people are big and strong. Was it really all? They go on, they say, we're like grasshoppers compared to them. Okay, I know the feeling, all right? But that's a little bit of an exaggeration when you say we're like grasshoppers compared to them. Whining, complaining, grumbling. It was so bad that the Bible says that a group of them said, here's what we should do. Let's organize together and let's go back to Egypt. We were better off in Egypt. What were they doing in Egypt? They were slaves. And they think that's better than obeying God and doing what he called them to do. Let's go back. And then they said, let's have an election and let's get new leaders because this Moses guy and his sidekick Aaron are killing us. They're the ones who got us in this mess. So let's elect new leaders. What does comparison lead to in your life? Is there any upside? Does it ever make you feel good? I guess if you could pick out somebody really on the low end, might make you feel a little better about yourself temporarily. But you know, comparison's bad either way. When it makes you look good, it's just as bad as when it makes you look bad because it's not healthy. You're not supposed to be comparing yourself to other people, period. It's never, ever appropriate. We're going to talk about when it is appropriate here in just a second. So what happened to these folks as a result of the comparison? The Bible says, and it's kind of harsh, but those 10 guys that you guys didn't recognize their names and I can't pronounce, they died. Just like that. They died. Boom, dropped dead. Not only that, but the people who complained and followed after them, guess where they got to spend the rest of their life? Wandering around in the desert until they all died. So the 10 guys died immediately. Those that followed them got to spend the rest of their lives wandering around in the desert, missing out on God's plan for their life because they fell for somebody who fell into the trap of comparison. The rest of the people, you know, there were innocent people in this too, right? You had Joshua and Caleb and everybody that was on their side. Well, did they get to go into the promised land? Not right away. They had to wait at least 40 years. So even innocent people, these are innocent bystanders. They're not participating in the comparison game. But they were harmed. God's will for their life was delayed 40 years because other people. And whenever we sin, whenever we make poor choices, almost always other people get harmed in that process. People that had nothing to do with your poor decision were harmed. And you've been on the other end of that too, where you were the innocent party, and yet you had to bear the consequences of someone else's poor decision. Am I right? We've been on both sides of that deal. I remember one time at football practice, we had this really mean coach, and this was like early on. I'm like 8 years old, I think. And some of us were having you put your helmet on, you have this kind of sense of, invincibility. So we're throwing these massive rocks and chunks of hardened mud at each other, just whooping at each other, and if somebody threw it at you, just kind of, and hope that it hit your pads or bounced off your helmet. And our coach was a really mean guy, and he drove a classic Camaro. It was a beautiful car. He kept it pristine, and it was always a big deal. He'd drive up in it, And so I had this big hunk of hard clay, and I threw it, and when I threw it, it kind of slipped out of my hand because it was really too big to be thrown, and it went way to the right. And he was standing by his car, and it hit dead center in the hood. Boom! And made a dent in the hood of his car. And for that reason, one person's bad choice, the whole team suffered. And it took me a while to earn back everybody's friendship because they were so mad because of we called them crabs. Do y'all still do that kind of stuff? On all fours, doing the whole length of the field back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. It was awful. But one person's choice led to everybody suffering from it. So what are some of the consequences that people today experience because they fall into the comparison game? I think about things like depression, suicide, eating disorders, cutting, pulling hair, all the things that go along with the anxiety. A lot of the anxiety that people experience, the root of it is in comparison. They wish their life was different. They wish their life was more like this, more like that, more like the other thing. Loneliness. Some people get hung up on their looks, and that's all they think about. They spend hours a day trying to look like something in a magazine that's not even real in the first place. It's photoshopped and touched up and all that kind of stuff. There's just not, and even stuff. People get hung up on stuff. They start this game like, whoever has the most toys and the most stuff wins. And then it takes them years of their life and wasted tons of money that they could have used for ministry or doing something useful, spent on stuff, and then they wake up one day and realize it was a complete and total waste of time trying to keep up with what everybody else has going on. So what's the point? The point, there's nobody wins in the comparison game. There are no winners. Even when you're not the one being compared, if you fall in the trap of comparing other people, and maybe you have a way of complimenting others by comparing them to someone else. Not good. Not good. My grandmother was a great lady, but that was the way she would compliment us by telling us we were so much better, something about us was so much better than someone else. Now, we discovered later that most of that was made up, but still, nonetheless, in her heart, she thought she was doing something good, but she was actually doing something harmful because it developed a pattern of comparing and thinking, well, as long as I'm better than that person, then I must be okay. There's nobody wins at this game. Don't fall into the trap. There's only two people, don't show the slide yet, there's only two people that you should be comparing yourself to. There's two people you can legitimately compare yourself to. Anybody know who they are? Your mom and dad. No. Do not compare yourself to your mom and dad. Okay, Jesus is always a good answer at church, and we're kind of at church. We're not going to separate God and Jesus. We're going to make them one person. So Jesus is one of the people that's it appropriate to. Who's the other person? What'd you say? I can't hear her. Yeah, yourself. The other answer is yourself. Your past and your future, though. Okay? So Jesus, you compare yourself to Jesus. Give me that first scripture verse. So keep your eyes on Jesus, who both began and finished this race we're in. Study how he did it, because he never lost sight of where he was headed. That exhilarating finish in and with God. He could put up with anything along the way, cross, shame, whatever. So when you're comparing yourself to Jesus, it's for inspiration. It's kind of like if you think things are bad for you, then imagine what it would be like to live a sinless, perfect life and die on the cross for nothing that you did, but for the sins that other people committed. Your whole life is dedicated to this. So compared to what Jesus went through, we've got nothing to, we can't complain about anything, because nothing that, you give the worst sob story in this room doesn't compare to what Jesus went through. So yeah, first person you compare yourself to is Jesus, but you do it for inspiration. For inspiration. Whenever you start feeling down, or you think about, no, when I think about what Jesus did for me, this really isn't that big of a deal. And then secondly, you compare yourself to yourself. Let's look at this other verse. That's not it. There it is. Make a careful exploration of who you are and the work you have been given, and then sink yourself into that. Don't be impressed with yourself. Don't compare yourself with others. Each of you must take responsibility for doing the creative best you can with your own life. That's in Galatians. A buddy of mine that I grew up with is a famous preacher. If I named his name, probably 90% of you guys in here would know this guy. We went to college at the same time, went to different colleges. He had to take a public speaking class at Georgia State University. The guy was a great communicator even back then. He's like 21 years of age then. Incredible communicator, taking a public speaking class. So you can imagine, piece of cake, right? So he gives one of his speeches, and his professor gave him like a B- on the speech. And he was like, what? How can I get a B-? That speech was awesome. So he actually made an appointment and went to see his professor to complain about his B-. And here's what he said to his professor. Professor, you know good and well that I gave the best speech of anybody in the class. My speech was the absolute, compared to those other people, my speech was by far the best. And the professor said, you're right, but I wasn't comparing you to the other people. I was comparing you to you. And I knew what you could do, and you didn't give it your best effort. That wasn't your best. You just did enough to get by because you were comparing yourself to everybody else in the class instead of comparing yourself to yourself. If you want to compare yourself to somebody, compare yourself to yourself of a year ago. Compare yourself to yourself of a month ago. Am I on the right path? Have I improved? Am I closer to God today? Am I in a better relationship with my parents today? My brother, my sister, my friends. Am I in a better place with them today than I was 6 months ago? Think about the things that you compare on a physical realm. If you guys work out, sometimes, you get in there and you're doing your thing, and, they have those little pins in the end there. I hate those things because you follow some big burly guy, and it's like, and so you got to do the moving the pin, the shameful moving of the pin, like, right? And then when you get done, you walk by and you go, and you put it back down low, right? Because you're comparing yourself to that. No, that's not right. What I should be thinking about is a month ago, how much was I lifting? How many reps was I doing, right? Comparing myself to myself. If you're a golfer, is my score getting better? Not am I better than this other guy? Am I improving as a person? Whatever it is, academics, whatever it is, compare yourself to yourself. That's an appropriate comparison in order to kind of evaluate. So it's for accountability. Compare yourself to yourself. So when you talk to people, not only do you need to internalize this truth, but internalize it as when you talk to other people about where they are in life. Instead of saying, well, how are you doing compared to somebody else? Well, how are you compared to where you were 6 months ago? That's a healthy conversation, right? It's going to be a lot more meaningful than saying, how are you compared to Galileo or Gotti or one of these other 10 guys that's now dead, right? Compare yourself to yourself. Jesus and yourself. So, and the thing to remember, and the closing point I want you to think about is God doesn't make mistakes. I entitled this message tonight, This Is Me. This is me. How many of you guys saw The Greatest Showman? Saw the movie, right? I'm not ashamed as a guy. Not ashamed as a guy to say I like musicals. My wife's in the back. She can testify how much I listen to this music almost every day that I go running. It's The Greatest Showman on my in my phone. But there's a song in there called This Is Me. And it basically talks about the fact a whole group of people who've spent their whole lives being bullied and made fun of because they're different and comparing themselves to what people consider normal. Okay? And so I want to say to you, God made you the way you are to be you. You're the only one who can be you, so stop trying to be somebody else. You're not going to be any good at that. You ever tried to be somebody else? It's not easy. It's difficult. You're not going to be good at it. The only person you're going to be good at being is yourself. So embrace it. Embrace the passions, the desires, the interests that God has given you. Embrace those things and pursue them with everything you got. Don't be something just because you think that's what other people want you to be. Figure out what God's called you to be and completely embrace it and pursue it with everything that you have. So what's the takeaway tonight? Here's the homework, if you will. Let's get ready for school a little bit. Sorry. I want you to try to think about over the next few days how much of your conversation and your thoughts centers around comparison, and try to change the subject. Don't fall into that trap. If you'll think about it, and if you got some friends that are here tonight and you hold each other accountable, you'll be amazed how much of your time is spent falling into this dangerous trap. And then try to lead the conversation, if it's a conversation with other people, towards self-improvement, comparing yourself to yourself, or talking about God and how what He did for us, the great love, the selfless love that He demonstrated, His faithfulness that He demonstrated for us, how that should inspire us to go after Him with everything that we have in our being. And then remember that God doesn't make any mistakes. You know, I've always been short. I didn't just suddenly become short. It's kind of been a thing from day one. And so I remember it used to bother me when I was a kid. I remember when I finished the first grade, my mother went to the school and the teacher said, the principal came to my mom and she said, you need to hold him back. Wesley, that's what they call me. You need to hold Wesley back. He's just so much smaller than everybody else. See, you're laughing at me. Come on, that hurts. Of course, I wasn't privy to this conversation until later. But anyway, so my mom was like, okay, I guess we got to do that. And she starts walking to the car. And my teacher, the person I was in the classroom with, Mrs. Klein, she came running up to my mother. And she said, I know what the principal said, and I'd get in trouble if you tell her I told you this. But please do not hold him back. Yeah, physically he's smaller than everybody else. But he will wreak havoc next year if he has to come back and repeat the grade because he'll be so bored. Please don't do that. Okay? So I've had to deal with these things all my life. Whenever there's joking or kidding going around, where's it going to go? It's going to go to something about height, a lack thereof. That's cool. I don't care. I played varsity basketball in high school. I was the only guy on my team who couldn't dunk or touch the rim. So all my friends were there to defend me. Anytime, all the tall guys were my buddies because I was the guy who was distributing the ball to them so they could score baskets. The point guard, all right? So instead of focusing on those things about yourself that you don't like or that you would change if you had the power to do so, focus on the things, the gifts, the passions, the aptitudes that God's given you, and develop those with everything that you've got. A lot of students, adults too, spend their whole life focused on that weakness, trying to improve that weakness, instead of focusing on their strengths and making their strengths even stronger. And you're much better off in life, generally speaking, to focus on things you're already good at and get better at them than something you're not any good at and just keep trying to get better at it when you just can't. Does that make sense? You following me? I have been around people that I want to go, dude, give it up. You've been trying for 20 years. Find something else, you know? But sometimes we have a lack of self-awareness and we focus on those things that aren't near as important. God's given every single person in here strengths, aptitudes, passions that are uniquely yours. Focus on that instead of comparing yourselves to others. Now, we're going to have a time of invitation tonight, give you an opportunity to respond publicly or where you're seated. The band's going to come and play through a song. And here's what I want you to be thinking about. I want you to consider making a commitment to not falling in the comparison game. And one of the ways that you can help yourself is by sharing that commitment with other students, your friends, maybe even with your parents, and say, Mom, Dad, I need help. Can you, if you hear me say something where I'm falling into that comparison game, call me out on it. And by the way, I'm going to do that for you too. Because parents can be the world's worst at falling into the comparison trap. Okay? And then remember, as you're sitting here tonight, I don't know where you are spiritually, but you think about what Jesus did for us, his faithfulness, his love for us. If you don't have a relationship with him yet, I want to encourage you, all of this will make a whole lot more sense when you're in right relationship with Christ. I know we've got some of our volunteers here tonight that are going to be down across the front. And if you want to talk to someone about having a relationship with Christ, I want to encourage you to come and speak to one of them and just say, you know what? I need to get this straight. I need to enter into a relationship with Christ. Can you help me do that? And there's plenty of adults here and other teenagers too who can help you in that process, okay? So let's stand. If you would, we're going to sing, and I'm just going to ask you to respond in whatever way God asks you to respond.